Why do great nations fall? It's a question historians have debated for centuries, but the answer is rarely a single cataclysmic event. It's not the external invasion or the final decisive battle. It's a slow erosion from within, a decay of standards, a loss of shared purpose, a hollowing out of the core principles that once gave it strength. The rot starts in the foundations. The exact same process is happening today, not at the level of nations, but at the level of the family. The family unit, the single most important institution for forging human beings, is crumbling. We are raising generations adrift in a sea of chaos, armed with smartphones, but without a moral compass, gorged on information, but starved of wisdom, connected to a global network, but disconnected from the people sleeping in the next room. We see the symptoms everywhere: anxiety, confusion, a desperate search for identity, and a profound lack of resilience. We have outsourced the raising of our children to algorithms and influencers, and we are shocked when they lack character. This is not a political problem. This is a philosophical one. It is a crisis of the mind. I spent the first half of my life chasing the definition of success our culture sold me. I built a technology company from the ground up. I mastered strategy, negotiation, and the art of relentless, punishing work. I had the money, the recognition, the corner office with the sweeping view. By every external metric, I had won. But inside, I was a refugee in my own mind. My inner world was a storm of anxiety and reactive anger. My success was a skyscraper built on sand, and my family life was paying the price. We lived in the same house, but we were strangers, each orbiting our own anxieties. My breaking point came not from a market crash, but from a quiet dinner, where I looked at the faces of my wife and children and realized they were looking at a ghost. The man they needed was gone, replaced by a machine built for achievement. That was the beginning of my true education. I turned to the thinkers who didn't offer fleeting hype, but who provided a blueprint for building an unbreakable mind. I turned to the Stoics, to Epictetus, the slave who taught that true freedom is internal to Seneca, the statesman who navigated power and chaos, and to Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled the world but focused on ruling himself. I learned that the mind is a fortress, an inner citadel, and I learned that a family can be a collective fortress, but only if it is built with intention, brick by brick. The philosophy of the iron mind is the antidote to the chaos of the modern world. It is not about being emotionless, it is about refusing to be a slave to your emotions. It is about building a legacy, not of wealth, but of resilience. A legacy of character that echoes through generations. So I ask you, is your family a fortress, a place where character is forged and minds are fortified? Or is it a house of cards, beautiful on the outside but waiting for the first strong gust of wind to collapse? What is the core operating system your family runs on? Intention or the accidental chaos of the world? In a storm, a ship without an anchor is at the mercy of every wave. It's tossed and turned, its direction dictated by the chaos of the sea until it's inevitably dashed against the rocks. Today, most families are trying to navigate the hurricane of modern culture without an anchor. They are adrift, and they don't even know it. They chase fleeting goals, the next vacation, the bigger house, the college admission, believing these are destinations. But they are just waves. What, then, is the anchor? What is the unshakable foundation upon which you can build an iron mind legacy? It's the first pillar, faith. Now let's be clear. When I say faith, I am not necessarily talking about organized religion, though for many, that is its most powerful expression. I am talking about a foundational belief system, a shared understanding of the world that answers the great why. Why do we act with integrity? Why do we persevere through hardship? Why do we serve something larger than our own momentary appetites? Faith, in this sense, is the family's North Star. It is the conviction that there are timeless truths and permanent principles in a world that screams that everything is relative and temporary. During my burnout, when my company was on the verge of collapse and my health had failed, all the external markers of my identity were stripped away. The money, the status, the reputation, they were worthless. My family didn't need a CEO, they needed a husband and a father. What held us together in that darkness was not my bank account, but a shared belief that our worth was not tied to my success. We had a foundational faith that our purpose was to face this trial with courage and to learn from it together. That period of failure taught me more than a decade of success ever could, because it forced us to find our anchor. The great error parents make is that they try to teach faith through lectures. It cannot be done. It must be modeled. It must be lived. Your children see through the hypocrisy of do as I say, not as I do with piercing clarity. They don't listen to what you say, they watch what you value. Where do you turn under pressure? Do you model panic, or do you model a calm reliance on your principles? Do you show them that your faith is a decoration for Sunday morning, or the very lens through which you see and act in the world every single day? A practical way to begin building this is to establish a simple, repeatable ritual. Not a sermon, but a practice. One family I mentored started what they called the weekly compass check. Every Sunday evening, for just 15 minutes, they would sit together and each person would answer 2 questions. What was the hardest thing this week? And where did we see our values in action? This simple act did 2 things. It normalized struggle, and it connected their daily actions back to their core beliefs. They were actively modeling how their faith operated under real-world conditions. This is how you forge an anchor. The Stoics had a concept for this: logos, the universal reason, the ordering principle of the cosmos. A family with faith is a family that has its own internal logos. It has an organizing principle that provides meaning, direction, and stability when the world outside offers none. It is the source code for your family's operating system. So, ask yourself these questions tonight. When adversity strikes, what does your family instinctively turn to for strength? Are you actively modeling your core beliefs in the heat of daily life? Or are you just hoping your children will absorb them by osmosis? We live in a culture that worships a dangerous and false idea of freedom. It's the idea that freedom is the absence of all restraint, the elimination of all structure, the ability to follow any impulse at any moment. This is not freedom. This is slavery to appetite. It is the definition of chaos. True freedom, the kind that allows you to build a life of meaning and purpose, is the exact opposite. It is a product of structure. It is forged in the fires of the second pillar: discipline. Most people hear the word discipline and think of punishment, of harsh rules and rigid control. That is a profound misunderstanding. Discipline is not about punishment. It is about training. It is the consistent, daily practice of choosing a higher principle over a lower impulse. It is the bedrock of self-mastery, and it is the single greatest gift you can teach your children. A family that lacks discipline is not a free family, it is a weak family, vulnerable to every fad, every distraction, and every crisis that comes its way. I saw this firsthand with a young executive I mentored years ago. He was exceptionally brilliant, a strategic genius, but his life was in shambles. His team at work was chaotic, his home life was a mess, and he was constantly putting out fires. He believed discipline was about grinding harder, about applying more brute force. I told him he was wrong. Discipline isn't about force, it's about systems. We started with one seemingly small system in his family life: a non-negotiable family dinner every night at 6:30 p.m. No phones, no television, no distractions. Just the family, present with one another. The initial resistance was immense. But within a month, everything began to change. That one act of discipline created a predictable island of order in the chaos of their day. It forced them to manage their time better to be home. It opened up lines of communication that had been dormant for years. That single, disciplined habit created a positive cascade that brought order to his home and eventually to his leadership at work. He learned that discipline wasn't his cage, it was his architecture. You can build this architecture in your own family, starting tomorrow. I call it the first hour protocol. Instead of waking up and immediately surrendering your mind to the frantic, reactive energy of a glowing screen, the entire family commits the first hour of the day to a disciplined routine. For example, 20 minutes of silent reading, philosophy, scripture, great literature. 20 minutes of light physical activity or chores. 20 minutes of planning the day ahead, with each person identifying the single most important task they must accomplish. This isn't about creating mindless robots. It's about training the mind to start the day with intention, focus, and purpose, rather than with distraction and anxiety. It teaches that you are the commander of your morning, not the other way around. This practice is a direct application of the Stoic dichotomy of control, taught by Epictetus. He argued that our suffering comes from confusing what we can control with what we cannot. The external world, the traffic, the news, the opinions of others, is not in our control, but our thoughts, our judgments, and our actions are. A disciplined family is one that systematically trains itself, day after day, to focus its energy on its own actions. Discipline in the home is not about controlling your children. It is about creating a predictable, structured environment where they learn to control themselves. So reflect on this. Does your family's daily routine build mental strength, or does it breed mental chaos? Are you teaching your children that discipline is a punishment to be avoided, or that it is the very tool that forges true freedom and an iron mind? Imagine you could leave your children an inheritance of $1 million. That money could provide comfort, opportunity, and security, but that money could also be lost in a single bad investment. It could be squandered in a year of foolish living. It could be stolen. It can, and often does, vanish within a single generation. Now imagine you could leave your children an inheritance of impeccable character, unshakable integrity, quiet courage, and a deep sense of justice. That is an inheritance that can never be lost. It cannot be stolen. It is an asset that only grows with time and appreciates with every challenge it faces. This is the third pillar, and it is the ultimate generational gift: character. We have become obsessed with building our children's resumes. We fill their schedules with activities, tutors, and sports, all designed to make them look impressive on paper. We are meticulous architects of their external image, but we have neglected the far more important task, being the architects of their internal character. Reputation is what other people think you are. Character is what you are when no one is watching, and in the crucible moments of life, your reputation will be worthless. Only your character will remain. My grandfather was a cabinet maker. He never earned much money. He owned a small house and drove an old truck. He left behind no stocks, no bonds, no property empire. But he left a legacy that has shaped every generation of my family since. I remember being a young boy, maybe 7 or 8, and going with him to a lumber yard. The owner, who was busy and flustered, made a significant error in the bill and undercharged my grandfather by what was, for him, a very large sum of money. No one would have ever known. But on the drive home, my grandfather was quiet. He turned the truck around, drove the 30 minutes back to the yard, walked in, and explained the error to the owner. He paid the correct amount. He never spoke of it as some grand moral lesson. For him, it was just what you do. That single action, that story, became a foundational myth in our family. It taught me more about integrity than 1,000 lectures. That is a true inheritance. You cannot give your children character. You can only create an environment where it is relentlessly forged, tested, and celebrated. A practical way to do this is to implement a Virtue of the Month challenge. As a family, you choose one virtue from the great traditions: courage, temperance, justice, or wisdom. For that month, you make it a topic of conversation. You read stories about it. You point out examples of it in movies or in the news, and, most importantly, you challenge each other to actively practice it and share the results. At the end of the month, at a family meal, you go around and share one instance where you succeeded in practicing that virtue, and one instance where you failed. This models humility and shows that character is not about perfection, but about the conscious, daily effort to be better. The great Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not for an audience, but for himself. It was his private journal for self-improvement. He was actively building his own character, one reflection, one course correction at a time. He understood that character is a verb, not a noun. It is a process, not a destination. A family that prioritizes character is a family that understands this distinction. It builds a legacy that is immune to market crashes, political shifts, and the inevitable storms of life. Ask yourself these two questions. When your children eventually face a difficult moral choice alone, what stories from your family's life will they draw upon for strength and guidance? And in your daily life as a parent, are you more focused on building your child's resume or their character? There is an old proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. The same is true for building your family's legacy. The temptation is to feel overwhelmed, to look at the gap between where you are and where you want to be and to decide it's too late or too difficult. That is a lie. A fortress is not built in a day. It is built one brick at a time, one decision at a time, one day at a time. Your family's legacy is not some abstract concept you leave behind when you are gone. You are building it, or neglecting it, with every choice you make today. The work begins now. I once worked with a family that was at a breaking point. The parents were successful professionals, the kids were in good schools, but the home was a cold war. They were disconnected, resentful, and living like roommates. The father felt that fixing it would require some monumental, life-altering change he didn't have the energy for. I told him to forget the grand overhaul. I told him to start with one brick. We worked together, and they decided to write a simple, one-sentence family creed. After some debate, they landed on this. We face our challenges together. We always tell the truth, and we look for ways to help. They wrote it on a small whiteboard in their kitchen. That simple sentence became their constitution. It was a reference point. When one of the kids was struggling in secret, the creed was a reason to speak up. We face our challenges together. When a mistake was made, it was a reason to own it. We always tell the truth. It was the first brick, and from it, they began to rebuild. It was the start of their fortress. So, how do you lay your first brick starting today? It doesn't need to be complicated. Here is your plan. First, define your family creed. This week, sit down together and write that simple mission statement. What are the one or two non-negotiable principles that define you? Make it short, memorable, and powerful. Write it down and put it where you can see it every day. Second, create one tradition. Do not try to change everything at once. Choose one simple, repeatable ritual and make it non-negotiable. A screen-free dinner on Wednesdays. A walk together on Sunday afternoons. A weekly reading from a book of wisdom. The consistency of the ritual is more important than the content. It is the act of coming together with intention that builds the walls. Third, model vulnerability. Strength is not pretending you are perfect. True strength is the courage to be honest about your struggles. At that family tradition you just created, be the first to share one area where you failed this week and what you learned from it. This gives your children permission to be human and teaches them that resilience is forged in recovery, not in the absence of failure. Finally, honor the effort. When you see a family member living out your creed, acting with integrity, showing discipline, demonstrating faith, call it out. Acknowledge it. Reinforce the very behaviors that are building your legacy. What is rewarded is repeated. The Stoics spoke of sympathia, the profound awareness that we are all interconnected parts of a single, larger whole. A family with an iron mind, A family built on a fortress of faith, discipline, and character does not exist for itself alone. It becomes a source of order, strength, and light in a chaotic world. By building your family, you are rebuilding your community. You are reinforcing civilization itself. The work is not easy, but it is the most important work you will ever do. So, I will leave you with this call to action. What is the first brick you will lay for your family's fortress? In the comments below, share the one tradition or value that has shaped your family, or the one you commit to starting this week. Let us learn from one another. Let us build together.